Welcome back to Dead Reckoning, the Human Life Expectancy channel. In our last video, we concluded that Homo sapiens is quickly evolving to become more about the evolution of ideas than the evolution of genes. We've also spent a lot of time focusing on the appropriate evolution of genes through volitional evolution. Since the evolution of our ideas is more rapid and could be even more impactful on our species and our planet than the evolution of genes, focusing on the appropriate evolution of ideas is every bit as important. So in this video, we'll explore what we can do to advance the evolution of ideas. So how should we do this? In our last video, we noted that ideas seem to arise naturally as dilemmas are perceived. So, to support the evolution of ideas, the first obvious thing we can do is to boldly identify and immerse ourselves in as many dilemmas as possible and apply our rational brains and the scientific method to discover underlying truths. Since this is what our curious minds naturally do, supporting the evolution of ideas is more a matter of not getting in the way and avoiding certain types of ideas that can actually hurt us. Some attempt to get in the way by trying to stop ideas from evolving. But like genes and technology, ideas evolve and cannot be stopped. Attempting to stop ideas from evolving is widely and properly considered to be counterproductive, wrong, or downright evil. In the dystopian novel 1984 by George Orwell, the thought police discover and punish thought crime, personal and political thoughts unapproved by the government. Most governments properly recognize this potential evil by protecting the freedom of speech and expression. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights ensure that, quote, everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference, and that, quote, everyone shall have the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, regardless of frontiers, either orally, in writing, or in print, in the form of art or through any other media of his choice. However, that doesn't mean that all ideas are the same. While the recent exponential explosion of information has resulted in great benefits to mankind and promises even more in the future, it comes with downsides. The propagation of fake news, manipulative messages, and hate speech make clear that some of the ideas that propagate most quickly may not be good for us. Just as cancer is characterized by uncontrolled growth of diseased cells to the detriment of healthy cells, the exponential explosion of information allows for uncontrolled propagation of certain bad ideas that could result in harm to or even death of our societies and species. This conversation is simply too important to hide behind the mistaken platitude that all thoughts have equal merit. The brilliant truth that all people deserve equal rights does not imply that everyone's ideas are equally helpful to humanity or other species. For that reason, and to promote discourse on this topic, we'll attempt to call attention to three groups of ideas which we will argue are bad, and discuss what might be done to control them. So, what ideas are bad? Let's start with the premise that ideas that help humanity to achieve its overall objectives are better than those that hurt its ability to do so. If, based on our recent videos, you agree that propagating and evolving ourselves and other species and living longer are among humanity's objectives, and if you agree that we should consider adding the evolution of thought as our fifth objective, then it doesn't seem like an overreach to acknowledge that ideas that help our abilities to achieve these objectives might be considered good, and those that hurt our abilities to achieve these objectives might be considered bad. Armed with this simple distinction, we can learn to foster good ideas and weed out the bad ones. So we'll highlight three groups of ideas that appear to hurt humanity's ability to achieve its objectives and that seem to offer the largest potential to negatively impact HLE. Group 1 are beliefs in things that just aren't true. Group 2 is ideas that are intended to deceive. And Group 3 is ideas that appeal to tribalism and incite violence. So let's start with belief in things that are not true. As Mark Twain famously said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so." Or, if you prefer, as Stevie Wonder famously sang, "When you believe in things you don't understand, then you suffer superstition." Just a few examples. In the Salem witch trials of 1692 to 93, over 200 people were accused of being witches, which of course they were not, resulting in over 25 deaths. Thomas Hutchinson, a prominent Loyalist politician of the province of Massachusetts Bay in the years before the American Revolution, was among those that got this dead wrong. He wrote of the accused, quote, "We cannot but humbly recommend unto the government the speedy and vigorous prosecution of such as have rendered themselves obnoxious, according to the direction given in the laws of God and the wholesome statutes of the English nation for the detection of witchcrafts." As another example, in 1912, P.A.S. Franklin, the vice president of White Star Shipping Line, declared, quote, "We place absolute confidence in the Titanic. We believe the boat is unsinkable." This incorrect belief resulted in more than 1,500 deaths soon thereafter. Unfortunately, we have a much larger recent example. Throughout 2020, U.S. President Donald Trump said many things that were simply not true about COVID-19, a pandemic which so far has killed over 6 million people globally. These included fallacious statements that it was a bioweapon created by China, that it would go away quickly, that we have it totally under control, and it's like a miracle, it will disappear. Regarding the wearing of protective masks, he said, "You don't need to do it. I don't think I'm going to do it. And maybe they're not so good." He also said that there were a range of potential cures that did not exist, including injecting bleach, and said of Democrats, quote, "COVID is their new hoax." A study by Cornell Alliance for Science concluded, quote, "The President of the United States was likely the largest driver of the COVID-19 misinformation infodemic." During its height, COVID-19 killed more U.S. citizens every day than all those that died in the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, and more people than died on the Day of Infamy, December 7, 1941, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Failure to acknowledge the risks of COVID-19 and take simple and appropriate steps cost us far more lives than even these large malicious attacks. During 2021, due to this misinformation, people living in counties that voted for Donald Trump were dying from COVID at rates that were 3 times higher than people in counties that voted for Biden. And to date, over 1 million people in the U.S. have died. 9/11 and the Day of Infamy each galvanized a strong response in the U.S., leading to years of war and to incur great costs in lives and treasure. Let's hope that the Dead Reckoning framework will inspire similarly large efforts to prepare us for the next pandemic and against misinformation. Unfortunately, believing things that are not true is much more natural than you might think. Of course, none of us comes to life knowing anything at all. We then come to have faith that our mothers, fathers, and family members will respond to our needs if we cry. Once we can speak, we naturally trust what our parents and loved ones tell us. Having no ability to confirm or refute what we're told, we all start by believing things that we don't understand. While this is inevitable and necessary, it sets a bad precedent for our ability to discern facts from falsehoods. We were born to believe what our parents and superiors tell us. Only later in life do we begin to question our beliefs and learn to use higher standards of proof, such as the scientific method, to more reliably discern fact from fiction. Even then, there's a lot we don't know and may never know. Some of the most fundamental questions are still unanswered. For example, how was the universe created? What is the nature of the mind, sensation, and consciousness? What happens when we sleep? Just to name a few issues. Our lack of knowledge in these fundamental areas is sometimes misused to undermine what we know to be true in others. But the fact that we don't know everything doesn't imply that we don't know anything. We may also have evolved to tell good stories versus believe what is true. It's likely that human sexual selection favored those stories that mates found dramatic, entertaining, and titillating over those that were merely true. Courtships are rife with stories that strain credulity as suitors attempt to present themselves in the most favorable light, and nerds replete with facts may have always struggled to procreate. Over eons, author Jeffrey Miller writes, quote, "This could have shaped our minds to be amusing and attractive, but deeply fallible." He says, quote, "Human ideology is the result. a tabloid concoction of religious conviction, political idealism, urban myth, tribal myth, wishful thinking, memorable anecdote, and pseudoscience. It turns out that truth may be subordinated to our biological imperative to impress potential mates and procreate. We also have great difficulty facing scary realities, especially our own mortality. As we discussed in our Is It Wrong to Want to Live Longer video, the fact that we simply cease to be is so scary and disheartening that many of us deceive ourselves, adopting false but reassuring immortality narratives that we'll be resurrected or reincarnated. Most of us, 81% in the United States, lie to ourselves about this most fundamental truth and align with religions and groups of others that support our specific counterfactual beliefs, which sets another bad precedent for recognizing other painful truths. This makes it easy to understand why we're having trouble facing the 7 existential issues, the most scary issues facing our species. The implication of this is truly dire. By denying the scary realities, we eliminate the possibility of effective response, ultimately dooming us to suffer the things we most fear. Responding to new information and evolving have always been critical to survival. As Leon C. Megginson noted, quote, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is most adaptable to change." So, if avoiding beliefs in things that are not true is quite literally a matter of life and death, what can we do? Fortunately, in the 17th century, we invented the scientific method, which defined an unbiased process to distinguish between beliefs and facts. Since that time, the scientific method has perhaps done more than anything else to bring us from the Dark Ages to the Enlightenment and driven the extraordinary success of Homo sapiens. However, we now find ourselves in the midst of an attack on science that's unprecedented since the Dark Ages. To fight this, we must reacquaint ourselves and others with this fantastic human invention. In the scientific method, beliefs are referred to as hypotheses, which translated from Latin literally means under ideas, ideas that have not yet been proved. And rigorous, unbiased experiments are conducted to verify or refute those hypotheses. While any hypothesis or theory can be disproven by finding even a single observation that disagrees with the predictions of that theory, those that survive numerous such tests eventually come to be regarded as scientific facts. Note that it doesn't matter who's proposing the hypothesis nor who is conducting the testing, so long as it is done in a transparent way and according to the scientific method. This separation of person and group from the determination of fact accounts for and actively negates the natural human tendency toward bias, offering a clearly superior view of reality from which we can all benefit. Also, as an added bonus, those that might disagree with your hypothesis or are actively working to try to refute it can correctly be perceived as your partners in finding the truth, not your enemies supporting another group or tribe. As long as they use the scientific method, whatever their results, their work will have contributed to the advance of knowledge. This goes a long way toward taming our tribalistic instincts. More on this soon. Of course, as we mentioned, many things have still not been scientifically proven. This should make us humble and reticent to accept a belief as a fact, no matter who or how many people hold it. We should encourage those in our spheres of influence to do as scientists do and cultivate the skill of proudly acknowledging what we don't know. After all, that opens up the possibility of learning, which is a much more useful, defensible, and fun position than relying on shaky or false beliefs. We must also recognize that our emotions are largely based on our perceptions of facts. In her book, How Emotions Are Made, Lisa Feldman Barrett relates that emotions evolved to help us make decisions before our brains evolved rational capabilities. We and many other animals evolved emotions, or feelings, to help us to make critical decisions that helped us to survive and thrive. In less advanced animals, emotions are algorithms over which they have no control. Animals that experience fear are triggered to flee, and animals that smell pheromones are compelled to seek their source. In humans, as our brains became more advanced, we developed the ability to temper our emotions with rational thought. The ability to control our emotions is also at the center of the human condition. We use our advanced cerebral cortexes to construct emotions ourselves based on what we believe to be true. Children have great difficulty with this, in no small part because their cerebral cortexes haven't yet developed, and because they don't know what to believe and what is true. This underscores the importance of ensuring that what we believe is true. If we believe things that are not true, we'll construct the wrong feelings, which will drive the wrong actions. Continuing with our COVID example, erroneously believing that it's a hoax may result in a failure to trigger our emotion of fear, which would otherwise drive you to take life-saving precautions. As another example, if you erroneously believe that a cheating lover is being faithful, you might allow yourself to feel the emotion of love to your detriment. As a result, you should be no more sure of or proud of your feelings than you are the set of facts that you allowed to trigger them. In this light, it makes perfect sense that leaders in the genetic revolution and science have paid increasing attention to the appropriate evolution of thought. Here are just 4 examples. Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist that highlighted the link between evolution of genes and the evolution of thought, has also spent considerable time writing about how belief in things that are not proven can cause great harm. Nobel Prize-winning theoretical physicist Richard Feynman wrote and spoke widely about the importance of believing in facts. Also, in 2014, James Watson penned Father to Son, Truth, Reason, and Decency. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson has conducted masterclasses on scientific thinking, where he covers personal and political truths versus objective truths. He also covers comments on religions where he says, quote, "That's why we call religions faiths, because they involve believing something in absence of evidence." When asked what he personally believes, he says, quote, "What I believe should be irrelevant to anyone. It's not about me." Theoretical physicist and cosmologist Stephen Hawking also devoted significant effort to guiding the evolution of thoughts. He says, quote, "There's a fundamental difference between religion, which is based on authority, and science, which is based on observation and reason. Science will win because it works." Without continued vigor to combat the exponentially increasing misinformation and fake news, often driven by faceless people and groups with selfish interests, we can easily fall prey to the wrong ideas, and that will lead to the wrong actions and ultimately to the wrong world. The second group of bad ideas is those that are intended to deceive. It's often said that where you stand depends on where you sit. We're all naturally biased toward the causes that benefit us, tending to highlight information that promotes those causes and discount information that discredits them. This can cause even the best of us to consciously or unconsciously engage in sophistry and use fallacious arguments with the intention of deceiving. Knowing this, we're all appropriately wary that everyone from salespeople to romantic suitors to politicians will attempt to sell us a bill of goods and make us believe things that are not true so that we'll do what they want us to do. That's why most countries, but notably not the US, allow you to know who is paying for messages and advertisements in the public media. We humans have always been relatively easy to manipulate by promoters and hucksters of all types. Marketers long ago figured out that media content that makes us feel good about ourselves, for example by making us feel young, sexy, smart, and accepted by desirable groups of people, is difficult to turn off. By providing such content, they encouraged us, don't touch that dial on our TVs and radios, and to keep on clicking on the internet. All of this results in greater advertisement revenues for the media companies that promote such content and helps companies to achieve short-term growth. The widely noted problem with this is that the news and media content we absorb is increasingly tailored to support and affirm our current beliefs, whether or not they are correct, and shields us from other facts and points of view. We increasingly live within biased media bubbles that make us lose track of reality and even each other. This is increasingly understood to cause an erosion of the common fact base that's necessary for humanity to make good decisions at every level, but most importantly to make species-level decisions on the 7 existential issues we face. In addition to being biased and eroding our common fact base, sophistry can have an even more pernicious impact. It's often used to promote one person or group over another, which can foment tribalism and even violence. This is our third group of bad ideas. We're also easily manipulated by those who help us to feel good about ourselves by feeling bad about others, raising the specter of tribalism. As Kate Atkinson wrote, quote, "Human nature favors the tribal. Tribalism engenders violence. It was ever thus, and so it will ever be." We agree that it has, but are more hopeful that something can be done about it. Humans evolved in close communities that engaged in tribalistic behaviors. These behaviors included being loyal to their groups above all else and discriminating against other groups. From an evolutionary perspective, tribalistic behaviors had tremendous survival value. The one thing that Homo sapiens has always had above all other species is the ability to think and coordinate actions across individuals to achieve group objectives. Strong group cohesion has allowed human groups ranging from hunter-gatherer societies, business organizations, and even modern nation-states to address the many challenges they face. Historically, this has often made the difference between life and death. We are naturally disposed to trust and believe people that are like us, and to not trust those that are different. Loyalty to the tribe was of paramount importance. Tribes that banded together to grow food, care for members, and protect themselves from others thrived, while those that could be divided fell. Also, challenging the tribe's authority structures carried with it the high risk of being exiled from the tribe or even killed. From the standpoint of group survival, this loyalty to the tribe was often more important than challenging it with new ideas, independent of their merit. As a result, none of us is exempt from tribal instinct. Studies reveal that much of our tribal bias operates outside our consciousness and control. Tribalism is deeply programmed into us. Just look at the popularity of modern competitive team sports. Their core message is, our team, consisting of people in our tribe, is better than yours. We've always sought to convince ourselves that our tribe or social group is superior to others. Why do we do this? Philosophers over the ages have disagreed, but it seems plausible that at times the survival of some tribes required that they take food, land, and other things of value from other tribes. Our genes have always caused us to be selfish and preserve our lives at all costs, including costs to others. As we did these despicable things to other tribes, a cognitive dissonance arose. How could we continue to feel good about ourselves? Since we all must think well of ourselves to maintain our sanity, families, and local social structures, we resolved this dissonance by telling ourselves that we deserved the things we took from others because we were somehow superior. The historical fact of our successes has also seemingly lent credence to this flawed argument. We won, so we must have been better, or so the grim logic goes. To remove any doubt about this, look at how we treat other animals. There too, while we're not responsible for the fact that we evolved to kill and eat animals, which can only be described as a despicable act from the perspective of the consumed animals, we tell ourselves that this is okay because we're superior to those animals. This was perhaps forgivable when we didn't have or didn't know we had an alternative. However, as we've noted, now that we have an increasing choice in this matter, for example by becoming vegetarians or by eating cultured meat and food products, it's high time to revisit this assumption. Since we're symbionts, involving both genes and thoughts, it's not surprising that through time, tribalism has come in two forms. We'll call these genetic tribalism and Theotribalism. Genetic tribalism is where one group considers themselves to be superior on the basis of their genes. Since genes have only recently been discovered, throughout history, genetic tribalism has shown itself as nationalism, racism, and other contrivances to assert that people like us, or with certain physical attributes, are better than others. Theotribalism, sometimes called belief superiority, is where one group considers themselves to be superior on the grounds of their theologies, thoughts, or beliefs. People with different ideas have always attacked each other, but nowhere more so than in religions, where theotribalism has led to crusades, inquisitions, and holy wars responsible for millions of deaths throughout human history. You might say that tribalism is the natural way of things and therefore is not our fault. After all, as we've noted, evolution is amoral, as distinct from immoral, and is driven by survival of the fittest, where all life competes on the basis of its ability to adapt to new conditions, independent of its impact on other beings. Not only is this not our fault, it's the means by which ever more complex and capable beings, such as ourselves, came into being. Also, in today's global commerce, economist Joseph Schumpeter's creative destruction is the common way of things. Companies directly compete for customers with the express intent of harming or extinguishing their competitors. The same is true with Theotribalism. Historically, tribes with certain ideas about practical things like how to develop and use tools and weapons, and less practical things like how we should treat people that are within and outside of our tribes, had clear competitive advantage over others. And today, the open warring of ideas from free speech is one of the principles we hold most dear. So what's the problem? Well, first, the core belief behind tribalism is simply not true. The belief that our group, defined by race, ethnicity, religion, nation, social class, etc., is superior to all others, that has been expressed by supremacists throughout the ages, is increasingly shown to be false. Scientific evidence is making it harder to support any notion that one tribe is better than another. New evidence proves that we're all mutts from a genetic perspective. In his book, Who We Are and How We Got Here, David Reich uses modern genetic analysis to prove that today's races are themselves the result of countless mergings of other races over the last 100,000 years. This hammers a scientific nail in the coffin of the idea that one race or group of races is any more pure or better than another. He writes, quote, "In the relatively recent past, human populations were just as different from each other as they are today, but that the fault lines across populations were almost unrecognizably different from today." The second problem is that since ideas can be changed far more quickly than genes, Theotribalism makes us prone to manipulation. For example, one of the most reliable ways that advertisers hook us on media is to engage us emotionally by convincing us that we're a critical member in a group that's fighting an epic battle against another group that is either wrong or just downright evil. Once we're emotionally engaged in such a battle, driven by our natural tribal bias, we seldom give up. Knowing that we're subject to this, advertisers, media outlets, politicians, and others seek to enroll us in these epic battles and often use specious information to enroll us. These are the elements of manipulation and dehumanization that can lead to violence. The third problem is that Theotribalism is anathema to the evolution of thought. It encourages us to believe that those who agree with us are good and those that do not are bad, without ever addressing the core issue of who is right. All you need to know is the Theotribe that they belong to, and you have your answer, wrong though it might be. It leads us to close down thought and inquiry, resulting in groupthink and ignorance, which, as we've shown, can kill far more people than malice. Tribalism could also cause us to fragment and compete with each other right at this time when humanity needs to come together to coordinate to address the 7 existential issues we collectively face. In today's world where we need to come together and cooperate on global issues to survive, the cost of tribalism is simply too high. We can no longer afford the luxury of bathing in such self-delusions, no matter how self-affirming and emotionally gratifying they might be. Given the exponential pace of the evolution of these bad ideas, weeding them out is not merely a philosophical issue. It's an existential imperative. As author Abit Naskar wrote, "Either we're alive and human, or we are dead and tribal." So, suggesting that we should not believe in things that are not true, should not deliberately try to mislead, and should not promote ideas that appeal to tribalism and violence is certainly not new. But in 2022, we find ourselves deeply divided by misinformation, willful deceit, and tribalism. So how do we fight this? To start, we can use a combination of increased self-awareness and constraint in how we propagate ideas, and create increased consequences for the deliberate use of misinformation and sophistry. Given the high importance we assign to the right of freedom of expression, government's abilities to intervene are limited, and the duty to control our thoughts falls mostly on each of us as individuals. We each have an active role in educating ourselves and choosing how we propagate thoughts. As we've suggested, this includes distinguishing facts from beliefs and continually challenging ourselves to avoid and eschew sophistry, tribalism, and violence. Without such interventions and guidance, Homo sapiens might be becoming more about ideas, but we might be becoming more about the wrong ideas. The outcome could be every bit as devastating for our species as selecting the wrong genes in volitional evolution. We should also consider creating greater consequences, such as jail time, for the willful use of misinformation, sophistry, and incitement of tribalism and violence. Invoking dead reckoning and the ethical principle of proportionality from our Ethical Perspectives video, we suggest that consequences should be proportional to the number of people harmed. For example, the willful provision of misinformation regarding public health, such as COVID-19, which can cause the deaths of millions, is a crime that should merit proportionately high consequences. Even more importantly, we need to choose a new story. As Homo sapiens, we should leverage our sapien side and let go of the small, counterproductive story that our group is better than others, and embrace a larger, more empowering story. We have a duty to recognize that we've recently evolved into a different place as a species. Our tribe has become global. For the first time, our knowledge, communication, and commerce are now global, and as we've argued, the existential issues we face require that we coordinate globally. So it can no longer be true that the best thing for one tribe is to put itself first and to take things from other tribes. Doing so eviscerates our ability to work together on the global existential issues we now face. For our own good, tribalism must subside. Instead of turning us into them, we must turn them into us by uniting to solve the existential issues we now face as a species. We can do this. Today, the physical security and survival of everyone on Earth is an attainable goal, allowing us to attack species-level issues like never before. This approach to change has been proven to work. COVID's a great example of global cooperation in the diagnosis, management, development, and delivery of vaccines. In Nigeria and other countries around the world, communities torn apart by group conflict are putting themselves back together by uniting around a common need or activity. In the U.S., these methods are also helping to improve community relationships with police in Toledo, Indianapolis, and other U.S. cities. Today, our species' 7 existential challenges create an unprecedented opportunity and an obligation to transcend tribalism and unite globally. Let's awaken to the reality that we are truly a global species that for the first time in our planet's history is in a position to evolve ourselves and our thoughts at an unprecedented rate. Instead of dividing into warring factions, we've got to work together to dispel the falsehood that we're in different tribes and unite to solve the larger challenges that we now face as a species. Our existential issues can and must unite us if we're to survive and thrive. In our next video, we'll explore simple things that you can do to help yourself to live longer. In the meantime, please hit the like button below, subscribe to the Human Life Expectancy channel to make sure you don't miss our next videos, and post comments for the topics you'd like to have us cover. Thanks for joining us. Till next time, as we say at Human Life Expectancy Inc., Hi Hua. Please do what you can to help yourself and to help us all to live longer.